Have you ever wondered what the role the Senate plays in Canada? I did, and decided to do some research on it and found multiple interesting facts that I would like to share with you today. The Canadian Senate was established with the Confederation Act of 1867 and was located in the Parliament's centre block. However, due to much-needed renovations, it is currently housed in the Senate of Canada building at 2 Rideau Street in Ottawa, which was originally Ottawa Central train station. Based on the UK's House of Lords, senators are appointed by the Governor-General upon selection of the Prime Minister. To be eligible for appointment, candidates must be 30 to 75 years of age, citizens of Canada, own property worth at least $4,000, and have permanent residency within the province or territory of appointment. I've gone over when the Senate was established and who is eligible to become a senator, but what is the Senate meant to achieve? Their main purpose is to work with the House of Commons in catching technical errors, suggesting improvements, scrutinizing legislation, and raising awareness on national issues by conducting research through committees. Because Canada is so broad, with most of the population situated in Ontario, the House of Commons elected members don't do an adequate job in representing Canadians by region. That is where the Senate comes in. As seen in this breakdown of senators per province and territory, the original view for the Senate was to provide debate on regional interests. Finally, the Senate is meant to serve a democratic part. As founder George Etienne Cartier states, second-guessing the Commons would balance democracy and protect private property owners. Appointing senators seems undemocratic, so why are we still appointing them? On page 341 of the textbook Canadian Politics Today, we can find the reason for this was to eliminate their susceptibility to influence by other politicians. But is that the case? Take a look at this clip of Jagmeet Singh from the NDP in 2019.
Reality is the Senate doesn't really represent people. There are political appointed positions that represent the parties. They represent the Liberal Party, they represent the Conservative Party. They don't represent the people and their interests. They're more interested in being a mouthpiece for the political parties that appointed them.
Jagmeet Singh is apparently not in favor of the Senate's current state, and he echoes the Maclean's newsletter on March 8th of this year, which stated, "The upper chamber has become a repository of political croonies, former media personalities, and many other depressingly unserious characters." The 1980s saw an ideal emerge, a triple E Senate, meaning elected, equal, and efficient. As Canadians were discussing this proposal, some were drawn to compare it to the American model, which passed their 17th Amendment in 1913, creating an elected Senate. This effectively led to a centralization of power in Washington. A National Post article argued that this centralized system of elective officials would not fly with most provinces and would strengthen the Senate's legitimacy, but not its accountability. It definitely seems as though the Senate's merit is in question, but the fact that their term lasts until age 75 enables senators to focus on long-term issues rather than periodical legislation. This provides stability within the House, since without elections, the power dynamic does not get altered too quickly. Donald J. Savoy, in the Policy Options on September 19th of this year, wrote, "The Senate provided sober second thought, and when compared to today's House of Commons, we can agree on his use of the word sober." Take a look.
So, the high school drama teacher over here accuses others of liking the sounds of their own voices. This from a guy who, if he were made of chocolate, he would eat himself.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I was a high school teacher before getting into politics, and I'm having a little trouble remembering what exactly the job that the Leader of the Opposition had before getting into politics.
Sober second thought is quite important for the Senate, but what about the competency and merit of its members? In February of 2012, Alberta Senator Joyce Fairbairn is declared legally incompetent due to Alzheimer's, but is allowed to vote on Senate legislation for 4 additional months. In February 7, 2013, Senator Patrick Brazeau is convicted for a list of charges and receives an absolute discharge. And finally, Raymond Levine of Quebec is convicted in 2011 for fraud and sentenced to 14 years in prison. In light of the Senate controversy, Tasha Keridan of the National Post developed some useful data and found that the Senate cost taxpayers $90 million every year, and the average senator worked 72 days in the House in 2014, amounting to an average salary of $142,400. The subsequent poll found that only 41% of voters were in favor of the establishment, 14% didn't really care for it, and 45% presented a favorable view for drastic senatorial reform. A 2018 newsletter stated, where it was once conceived as a forum for providing scrutiny and financial oversight of government businesses, the rise of public watchdogs such as the Auditor General and the Parliamentary Budget Office has entirely supplanted the role of the Senate. Because the Senate is entrenched in the Constitution, the Supreme Court has ruled that its abolishment requires the unanimous consent of the Senate, the House of Commons, and the legislative assemblies of all the provinces. Smaller provinces would not approve of this, however, and therefore the only option is to reform this institution. In 2007, Prime Minister Stephen Harper introduced Bill C-20, a bill proposing an introduction of consultative appointment elections. The Supreme Court ruled this unconstitutional, citing the need for provincial support. When Justin Trudeau replaced Harper, he established the Independent Advisory Board for Senate appointments in 2015, and as a result, independent senators now outnumber those with a political affiliation. In a September newsletter, Donald J. Savoy suggested the Prime Minister set up a consultation process when appointing senators to reform the Senate into a chamber for the coordination of federal-provincial relations. Appointment does not seem democratic. Some senators display subpar behaviors, and with abolishment not being an option, we are seemingly forced to reform. But is reform really necessary? What will happen once we make major changes to a system designed 150 years ago? Only time will tell, but until then, we need to compare proposed changes to the founders' design. A chamber for sober second thoughts.